When I first heard of the nifty indie game, The Witness, I didn't think much of it. I wasn't too convinced by everything I saw until I found out that it was made by Jonathan Blow, developer of the hit indie game Braid. I loved Braid a lot. It was incredibly interesting, and beating those puzzles was one of the most satisfying things I did during middle school. I didn't do a lot of satisfying things during middle school, but still. So of course I was gonna love The Witness, so I bought it, and played it, and loved it. So if I wanted to make a video on YouTube talking about something, my first stop had to be The Witness. Unfortunately, I was a little late to the party. It took until April of this year for me to finally play the game I didn't know I'd been missing, and in the past 2 years, ungodly amounts of content has been produced on this game. Well, not ungodly, but the people that did touch on it had quite a lot to say. And I say power to them. It occurs to me now that this game was easily a hit or miss, and so much discussion has arisen over this incredibly unique and charming indie title. I didn't know where I wanted to go with it. Did I talk about the underlying messages? Did I discuss the game's impact, how it's designed, why it's clever? I hadn't thought that far ahead. And after seeing so much discussion on what the game meant and why it was bad or why it was good, why it sucked or why it was endearing, I thought I needed to break out of that inner circle. More specifically, the inner circle of the people who played the games. Everyone wants to talk about what they experienced and what they think, but to an outsider, they don't want to approach a game that has mixed response and opinions. The trailers didn't really grasp me at first because it's hard to convey what this game does without just playing it. So instead of blabbing on and on about what I like and what I didn't like, I want to talk to you about why you should play this game, and how. As much as I want to talk about later parts of the game and stuff that would be considered spoilers, I feel I wouldn't be contributing much new. Rather, I want to talk about what the game gives, and why if you go into it with the right mindset, you might walk away appreciating this game just as much as I do, which is quite a lot. So if you haven't played The Witness, or if you have but want a little more convincing about why I think it's great, then you're in the right place. If you are actually watching this video because you haven't played The Witness, you're probably wondering what on earth this game is. Well, it's a puzzle game in every sense of the word. You're a person on an island surrounded by tons and tons and tons of puzzles. Every puzzle follows the same basic mechanic. You have a panel with a circle signifying the start, and a rounded exit signifying the end. Put forward most basically by the very first door you must open. But this game is far, far more than just solving mazes. It plays with your mind in several different ways. First, you're guiding a line through a maze, then suddenly you're guiding 2 lines through 2 separate mazes simultaneously. First, you're trying to have your 2 lines hit all the dots, but then you need to have the right colored line hit the right colored dot. Then the line is mirrored. Then one of the lines is invisible. You take time to grab an idea, understand it, and then execute it across a variety of methods, all the while exploring a certain portion of the island. The challenge keeps taking you further and deeper into the area until you finally get to the yellow box and are greeted with this delightful cutscene. There are 11 of these laser boxes scattered around the island, all shooting up to the same mountaintop. Each one being the culmination of an area that offers a unique puzzle concept that they take time to introduce, flesh out, and play with in several ways. Every time a mechanic is introduced, you can expect your perspective on it to be shifted drastically. In fact, I don't think there's a better word to describe the game with than the word perspective. Expect me to be coming back to it. A lot. Let's take a step back and talk about the clever way this game introduces its concepts. You will likely often reach doorways that have puzzle solutions you won't be able to solve yet, because you haven't learned the mechanics for them yet. But fret not, somewhere on the island, the puzzle mechanic is introduced in a clear and concise way. And no, it's not a little book that just tells you how the mechanic works. It's just a puzzle panel that presents the most basic form of that mechanic. You enter in like one of 3 possible solutions, and it likely works. Each consecutive panel then adds another couple ways the mechanic won't work. It gives you a little room for you to experiment with solutions, so you can understand just one little aspect of it. Each panel gets a little more complex and shows you a different way the mechanics work until you've got a basic understanding. Beyond that, the puzzles start to get a bit more confusing. They add elements that take the mechanic out of the isolation it was originally presented in, and find several ways to turn it on its head. Let's look at an example. Right after you leave the first area, you likely will follow the main path until you reach these tutorial panels for 2 different mechanics: the black and white squares and the dots. Although you won't have gotten it straight there, you probably passed a suspicious looking door on your way that has both of these mechanics shown, and at this point, you have no idea what on earth you're supposed to do. There's 4 starting points, 3 exits, and a bunch of symbols that could mean anything. You might try it for a bit, but likely eventually give up. After you walk away, you encounter the tutorials I just mentioned. Let's focus on the black and white one. You're presented with just one black square over a white square. You could try to go around the outside, but the correct solution is to draw a line through the middle. Then the start and end points move. This solution still requires you to draw a line through the middle, but it acts as a little barricade to people who are just trying to find the fastest way to the solution. Then you get an extra black square. Draw a line between the black and white square and you're good. Now it's a 2x2 grid with one lonely white square. If you try to go through the middle again, the puzzle will yell at you and you gotta try again. Simply draw a line between the white and black and you're good. But let's take a step back. You can still finish the previous puzzle correctly if you zigzag, and at that point you might think you need a line between every single square, regardless of color, but you'll find after not too long that that's just impossible. Moving on, the grid gets larger. But keep doing what you were doing, keep the white and black squares separated. You might think the white squares have a special property at this point that makes them need to be isolated from every other square, but no, that's also quite impossible here. Next puzzle is the same, but with a different endpoint, forcing you to shift your thinking for a second, which, by the way, if you go back you may notice also works as a solution to the previous puzzle. Next puzzle, and wait, hang on, that white tile is way up there. How am I supposed to keep the colors grouped when they're isolated like that? Easy. You don't need to keep them grouped, just separated from the other color. Now it makes a lot more sense why the zigzag solution to the earlier panel worked. And if you were thinking the white tiles needed to be placed underneath the black ones, this panel also disproves that. Moving on, we had the same puzzle with a different exit. Same idea, shift your thinking, and you're golden. You may have noticed that both of these puzzles had a little space thrown into them. They don't really do anything, but they let you know that the tiles don't have to remain separated from the spaces. This is incredibly useful because you get to the final puzzle now, and because of a new exit, you can't go around the sides anymore and let the white tiles hug the edges. Suddenly you have to group the white tiles through the spaces in the middle and keep the black tiles to the sides. Boom. Tutorial complete. Now, you've been gifted the knowledge of how the white and black tiles function when solving a puzzle, as well as the dots, which need to be touched by your line, by the way, but we skipped that to focus on the other part. So it's time to go back to the first door. You know how the mechanics work, so you can tackle it just fine now. Find the only starting point that works, build it towards the only exit that works, and puzzle solved. Now, even if you were still confused about the way the puzzle mechanics worked, say you only completed the panels by guessing, the panels are still open for you to experiment with. You can go back and see where your understanding falls apart, and test it on the panels where you already know a potential solution. It's clever. The game teaches you by slowly showing you every way the puzzle doesn't work, so that the challenge in other puzzles isn't understanding a puzzle's mechanic, but figuring out how to apply it. Because at first glance, the black and white tiles could mean anything, but after a few steps and a quick tutorial, the only way to understand them is the way they are presented. But the game doesn't force you to understand every part of it. It's an open world game. Sometimes if you spend too long looking at something, you get confused and frustrated. But that's the beauty of it. You can just walk away and go somewhere else. The island is full of different puzzle endeavors you can practically do in any order, although some require you to learn a mechanic from somewhere else first before you could feasibly tackle it. At the same time, there's never a moment where if one puzzle is stopping you from progressing, then you can't progress at all. It's only stopping you in that one area. Go elsewhere and you're fine. Even if you don't like getting stuck on a puzzle, there's always something else you can get distracted with. The game realizes not everyone gets every puzzle, as Jonathan Blow himself points out in the no-clip documentary of The Witness.
So one of the things I observed back when doing Braid is that different people find different things hard, right? So some people will find one puzzle very easy that other people are stumped on for hours, and vice versa.
The difficulty of a puzzle is generally a subjective thing, and if you aren't looking at something the right way, if you don't have the right perspective, you can be stuck. The game doesn't ask too much of you either. If you don't want to take the time to do everything on the island, then you don't have to. You only need to open 7 of the 11 laser boxes in order to enter the endgame on top of the mountain. But if you've taken the time to finish 7 of them, you'll probably have liked this game enough to finish all of them. Especially if you're solving puzzles for the sake of solving puzzles. Then you are guaranteed to get maximum enjoyment out of this game. The euphoria of looking at something long enough, having an epiphany, throwing in your potential solution, and then seeing your line light up with that puzzle completion chime is a feeling that's hard to beat. If you're worrying at this point that the game is too much of staring at panels and moving lines, then you are sorely mistaken. If that's all this game was, then you could just remove the island, take the panels, and throw them onto a mobile app store where you could just select the puzzles and solve them. If you were to do that, though, you couldn't even solve all the puzzles, since so many are designed around being in a 3D space, and not just on an isolated screen. The puzzles use the environment in clever ways to aid the puzzle solving, in ways that are best left found on your own, if I'm honest. The visuals aren't just filler. They're as much a part of this journey as the puzzles are themselves. Not only that, but the game challenges you to look beyond the puzzles, to not only see the different ways a puzzle could be solved, but the different ways the island can be seen. Look at the way these bird statues are looking at each other. Now change your perspective, and these bird statues are now the wings of your angelic shadow. Look at this woman screaming up at the sun in agony, and now look at her shadow, juggling some balls. There are countless upon countless of these little secrets hidden around, each one trying to get you to shift how you look at something, so a confusing symbol might enlighten a unique discovery. And no, not all of them use shadow play. Last thing, scattered around the island are these little audio logs that when tapped will give you a quote, from a Chinese leader to a biblical passage and many others that all give a little insight into how one looks at the world. It gives insight into someone's perspective on the world. This game isn't trying to convert you to these ideas, it's presenting them, letting them try to resonate with you and not really caring when they don't. I think that's what makes this game beautiful. It isn't forcing you to understand or accept everything, but it's giving you the room to. The puzzles open your mind by constantly getting you to change the way you look at them, so you can take that skill of changing your perspective and apply it beyond the puzzles. The game gives you plenty of room to challenge the way you think, to change your perspective without forcing you into that room. It's subtle and generous, and I love it. Now, obviously, this is just my perspective on things. There's that word again. And I don't expect everyone to interpret this game the same way when you play it. In fact, I don't expect all of you to understand this level of the game at all. It isn't required. You could just skip the audio logs, ignore what the ending means, and play this game for the puzzles alone. And you wouldn't be playing this game wrong. There really isn't a wrong way to play this game. I mean, if you keep going at the same puzzle over and over without finding a solution, and slowly drive yourself insane, then you might not get the best enjoyment. But that doesn't mean you can't do it. This game is open for you. But it's never too open that you don't know what to do. Also, don't feel like I've spoiled this game at all. There's still plenty hiding, waiting to be discovered. I've barely scratched the surface of what there is to find. And I hope at this point, I've at least convinced some of you to pick up this game. If not at full price, then at least on sale, because there's a lot for you to unwrap here. play this game for the pretentious, deeper meaning. Play it for just the puzzles. I don't really care. But if you like good puzzles in games at all, this is not one you should pass up. Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching. My name is Aiden, and you just witnessed... jokes. My first episode of Games Art. This is a show concept that I've wanted to do for a while. I, like many others, am a fan of video games, and I think video games are often underappreciated for what they accomplish. Beyond this, I hope to enlighten what makes so many games so damn incredible, and in some ways brilliant pieces of art, much like The Witness. Whether a game strives to give a profound message or moral, whether it has a unique tone that carries throughout the game, or is just crafted so delicately so that the player just has fun. So many games are amazing achievements, and I wanted to shed light on just a few. I spent a lot of time drafting this script. All this red text you see is when I thought I wanted to essentially write an essay on the meaning of The Witness, which I guess I kinda did, but not to the extent I was gonna go to. Besides, this was probably already done at its best with this video called The Unbearable Now. Don't watch it, by the way, if you haven't played the game yet, but definitely do afterwards. At least if you're as much a sucker for game interpretations as I am. In the future, expect to see new games, expect to see old. For now, I'll mostly be focusing on games you can get on Steam because I don't have a way to screen capture my console ones, but until then, hold on, my script just says to ad-lib an outro, and I don't know how to feel about that. So